OBR Straight Talk, episode 12, Maximum Chubb.
Welcome back, everybody, to episode 12 of OBR Straight Talk. I'm Bob Evans. He's Scott Kennison. Happiness has once again returned to the shores of Lake Erie in Cleveland. We are celebrating a Victory Monday. I woke up feeling pretty damn dangerous today. I don't know about you. Scott's got a Maximum Chubb on, ready to roll for this podcast. Everybody is fired up. Everybody is so fired up, Scott, that the forums on the OBR are pretty silent.
It's almost like nobody knows what to say when the Browns win.
No, all of the Debbie Downers out there, all of the shit on every little thing you say, people, they've gone silent except for a few choice people. Usually,
stand your ground, people. Stand your ground.
Usually we have 4 or 5 questions for every episode. We have one, and it's just like a half shot at Jimmy Haslam for taking so long to realize that Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley were the problem here. So we won't even justify this podcast with subscriber questions. Sorry, everybody who's listening. Maybe you should submit some good questions. But anyways, we've got a Victory Monday going on. The Browns defeated the Atlanta Falcons 28-16. And instead of making any of you out there wait any longer, since he was not able to join us last week, we're going to go ahead and right away on this podcast, we are going to join in. Well, he is going to join in. The man, the myth, the legend, Lane Adkins will join us right now. Lane has graced us with his amazing presence on tonight's podcast because it's a Victory Monday. Lane, how you feeling today?
Get rid of the small talk. Let's get right to it. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. Scott, how you doing?
The Browns won, and they won convincingly, and it's probably the best win they've had since Brian Hoyer beat the Bengals 30-7 in 2014. So it's a good Monday.
All right. Well, Lane, since you said cut the small talk, let's dive right into it. So the Browns in utter domination, words I never thought that I would say this year or any time in the near future, utter domination of the Atlanta Falcons 28-16 on Sunday at First Energy Stadium. Let's just go with Baker Mayfield. Had that amazing touchdown pass. What did you think of Baker's performance in this one? Is it Freddie Kitchens? Is it Greg Robinson? What's going on here that suddenly Baker is looking way better than he did when Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley were at the helm?
Well, what you have a situation now is an offensive coordinator who is sitting down, taking the time, communicating with the rookie quarterback, finding what makes him comfortable, what makes him confident, and has some suggestions for the rookie quarterback. That's a back and forth between the two. One of the things that happened this past week that was key in this game against the Falcons is they worked on his mechanics a little bit. He was getting a little loose with his mechanics. It was much tighter against Atlanta. His ball placement was excellent. The team had a lot of energy, and Baker Mayfield showed why he was the first pick in the draft.
No, and, I noticed the mechanics thing as well, and he did look like he's throwing the ball a little bit tighter, so that was good to see. Do you think the return of Rashard Higgins, although he wasn't targeted, 7 or 8 times, but do you think having that safety net out there for Baker is having an impact on him?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime that you put a talent on the field, when you're an offense that's as young as this team is in spots, and you don't have significant talent and your depth is hurting, and you got guys coming in and out of the lineup who haven't played this game at this level very much. When you get a guy like Higgins, who Mayfield worked a lot with in training camp, going back into the OTAs, that's a comfort zone. That's a safety net. Those two guys know what they're going to do. Mayfield knows Higgins, and you can just see, it's a confidence thing. This team played well. They got Perriman involved early. He held on to the ball. They moved the ball. It's these kind of things that with an offensive coordinator who gets it, who has a feel for what this quarterback can do, it changes the complexion of what an offense can do, and we're seeing it with this team.
I think you also have to give a ton of credit to, we've said it all year that if you can run the football effectively, it makes it a lot easier to pass the football. And, Nick Chubb has arrived. I think he put any doubts to bed about him as a potentially elite NFL running back. He dominated on Sunday. That was a game changer, and it forces, that's got to help Baker. That had to open things up.
Oh, sure it did. And it's not something that we haven't seen in flashes, Nick Chubb to start with. The unfortunate thing is that he had, 16 carries through 6 games or whatever it was when Carlos Hyde was here. And, moving Hyde gave Chubb the opportunity to show what he could do. The guy was an elite talent at Georgia before his injuries. He was very highly rated. He had an excellent season in Georgia before he was drafted by the Browns with the 35th pick. The guy got off to a little bit of a slower start in camp, came on. He's just a physical talent. He can play the game, who's got quick feet. And it's what you want. He's physical and can run the football. And anytime you can run the football in this league, it makes it easier for a quarterback, especially a rookie quarterback, that has had his ups and downs with a receiving core that is, fairly mediocre.
All right, I'm going to be a wet blanket. I'm going to do what I do and bring this thing back to a little bit of reality with my next question for you. How much of what we saw on Sunday was scheme and Kitchens and a new offense and Baker Mayfield fixing his mechanics? And how much of it was that it's just a hell of a lot easier to throw the football against a team that can't get home to the quarterback in the Atlanta Falcons, who have struggled to get to the quarterback all year?
Well, anytime you play a team that has struggles on defense and is not a good defensive team, you're going to have success. Atlanta couldn't get to the quarterback outside of Greg Robinson getting blown up once. They didn't generate much pressure. And you got a rookie quarterback who is able to get comfortable in the pocket, and you're calling plays to get it out of his hands quickly. The confidence level of that player and the unit in general just increases, and it helps open up the run game, which it did because Baker got off to such a tremendous start. I don't know what he was, 13-13. Whatever he did whatever he wanted to do. Atlanta tried to stop the pass, tried to stop the short passing game, and then it just opened up the run, and this team was relentless for an entire game for the first time we've seen all year.
I want to go right there where you left off with Baker Mayfield and the offense. Is there something going on with Jarvis Landry in this offense, or am I maybe just reading a little bit too into the game flow? Because I noticed that right away in that game, they went to him, I believe it was either the first 2 passes or 2 of the first 3 passes, and then if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Jarvis had another catch the entire game. Was it just is there something going on? Is he struggling to get open, or is it just the opposing team's like, hey, we're just going to blanket Jarvis and force somebody else to beat us, or maybe something else?
Well, there's quite a few times that Landry was open that Mayfield went through his progressions and went in another direction. The problem when you look at Jarvis Landry, the guy catches a lot of balls. But the problem is he's not a true number one. He's not that dynamic who's just going to create separation, a guy who's just going to make it impossible for you not to try to take the shot with him. This team needs a legitimate number one opposite of Landry with Higgins as the 3 to really help this team progress, move the football. So teams can't key on Landry, and they've done a lot of that over-under. And until the Browns can do this, it's going to be a problem with Landry being that focal point. He's not going to be a guy that's going to catch 6, 7, 8 balls for 100 yards every week, because teams are going to take that away, and they're going to make the rookie quarterback beat him another way.
Boy, it's really unfortunate that we didn't have an elite top 5 talent wide receiver who set passing records with bad backup quarterbacks on this team. It's a shame, though. If we had one, we'd probably let him go because he did an unauthorized media shoot without telling the team.
Well, there's more to it than that, but yeah, I get your point.
So where I want to go from here is a little bit of a joke, but also the truth. So it's now taken Greg Williams exactly 2 games to win 1 game, and we saw that monstrosity of a really difficult feat took Hugh Jackson basically 2 full seasons to accomplish. So Greg Williams now, going into the bye week with 1 loss, or one win, 1 loss. What would it take for Greg Williams to be actually in the legitimate mix here to remain as the Browns head coach in 2019?
A freaking miracle. What it's going to come down to is this team is going to have to win a lot of games, because let's face it, Greg Williams isn't the guy that's sitting at the top of the totem pole, but the team is just looking for any reason to retain him. John Dorsey, longtime NFL guy, been around forever. He's got his list of guys that he would like to potentially see here, or at least talk to. Greg Williams isn't a guy that just jumps off the chart at you. And what he's doing right now is, sure, he's auditioning, trying to hope that he can be retained or in this position if this team can just win games like they haven't done in over a decade. But, he's auditioning for his future as well. And he can show that, he could rally this team and put this thing together from 2-5-1 or whatever it was when he took the reins. And if he can show that this team can be ultra competitive, win games, he may put himself in an opportunity to be more than a defensive coordinator. It's questionable as ever going to happen due to his past, but the opportunity is there for him to showcase who he is and what he can do. And the Browns, they owe it to themselves to sit here and watch the show for the next month and a half and see if Greg Williams can be that guy. I don't see it happening.
I was going to say, it's really unfortunate, Lane, because he's building something that looks like it could be kind of special with this defense. You're talking about defense that's turned the ball over 25 times this year? 25 times. He's building this defense that has confidence. It's attacking. When this defense is healthy, it can be downright at times dominant. It hasn't always been, but there's flashes of something really good in this defense, and it doesn't have a lot of depth. And if Greg Williams isn't your next head coach, he's probably not coming back as the defensive coordinator. And how much of the way this defense is playing do you think is Greg Williams and his personality on this defense? And how much of that goes away if you bring in another defensive coordinator?
Well, of course, you're going to see change if Greg Williams isn't here. If he's not the defensive coordinator, if he's not the head coach, there's not a lot of guys in this league who call a game, play the type of defense that Greg Williams does. He's one of those guys that's all over the map. He can get a little too cute for his own good at times, and this team can be put in bad situations. The only problem is this team defensively, for the most part, plays with a lot of passion. They attack the football. They create turnovers. They make a lot of mistakes, fundamental mistakes, but the turnovers help make up for a lot of that. It's really going to come down to what happens with this team over the next month and a half or so. If they go on a roll like we have seen, it's going to be difficult for Jimmy Haslam to sit up there just knowing the situation with him since he's owned this team and head coaches. Greg Williams, if he rolls, this team wins 6 games with him as head coach, you may have to start considering him a little bit more than you would if he wins 2 or 3 games, because it's going to come down to is what this team looks like. And I wouldn't put it past him to be very competitive in these games that are going to come up against Cincinnati and Houston and Carolina. It's going to be interesting to watch.
So, if not Greg Williams, Scott and I got to talk about this last week at the end of the podcast, and I know how much you love to guess at who the next head coach of the Browns will be. So I'm not going to ask you to guess, but I would like to get your thoughts on the Bruce Arians. I don't want to call it like a debacle, but he kind of made a public declaration during the broadcast of a game that not only would he have interest in this job, but he's got a guy in mind to come with him in Chuck Pagano. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the Arians-Pagano conversation and what that could also mean for Freddie Kitchens' future here in Cleveland as well.
Well, if you look where this team's at right now with the talent base, they should be better than 3-6-1. This team should have probably won 6 games. And you have to look at the coach, the head coach, the coaching staff in general, and everything that's transpired. Bruce Arians just wins. It was 49-30 in Arizona, 9-3 in Indy. And this is a guy, he's 66. He had a health scare. I was around and talked to Bruce Arians on more than a couple occasions way back when he was here on staff when Butch Davis was here. This is a guy who knows football. He's passionate, and he gets Cleveland. He loves Cleveland. He loves the fans. And he wasn't sitting in the booth rah-rahing just because he's a guy in the booth who's a former head coach who may want to coach again. This is a guy who's really into it. When he says that, he would like to become the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, he means it. He wanted this job before, and he was passed over. And, I'm not that concerned about his age. I'm not that concerned about his health. You look at it and you can bring a Chuck Pagano with you. You retain Freddie Kitchens, and suddenly you have guys that have been there, done that, which makes it interesting for a team that should be much better record-wise than what they are. So Bruce Arians, by far, is not the worst-case scenario for the Cleveland Browns.
And to build off that real quick, Lane, it's something that we're going to talk about over the course of the podcast a little bit later, but the Freddie Kitchens pairing scenario here in Cleveland is intriguing, mainly because this is a guy who Arians actually made go from a quarterback's coach to a running back's coach in Arizona, so that way he could pad his resume for when he became a coordinator. So this is a guy that Arians was grooming years ago to become an offensive coordinator. And you mentioned the age thing. What more of a natural way to kind of progress things in Cleveland is to give Freddie Kitchens and Baker Mayfield this multi-year pairing. And then if Arians does decide to run right off into the sunset at like the age of 70, 71, you may have your future head coach in-house, a la, I'm not going to say like the same level, but a Bill Belichick, Josh McDaniels potential, like they have in New England right now.
You look at it, you bring up a good point. Freddie Kitchens is a guy, he's respected. He was moved around through different positions to learn the game from different focal points, to visualize things a little differently. And you can see that he thinks out of the box. You saw some stuff yesterday you just don't see at the NFL level. And people are saying, oh, yeah, he was just throwing stuff out there, because the Browns have to have trickery. No, they got in a wishbone, a reverse wishbone, and they ran the football at him. It's not something that is sight unforeseen. If you've played this game, you know how to defend. This guy thinks outside the box, and he's an excellent communicator. The communication between Baker Mayfield and Freddie Kitchens is superior compared to anything that's transpired here with Baker Mayfield through Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley and whatnot. It's Freddie Kitchens is a guy who's people overlook him a little bit, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens as we go down this path here, to see what happens with the offense and to see if it keeps developing and see what Baker Mayfield can do.
And he'll probably learn that halfback option passes to Baker Mayfield on a wheel route is not a really good play call to put in the book. He'll probably learn to take that one out.
Well, the problem with that play is that, you got your running back and you didn't read zone, and Atlanta just tore their ass up. If the awareness was there, that play never would have came off that way. So it was a mistake from the get-go. In theory, the play works, but the defense that they lined up in, it was a disaster.
So Lane, we've talked about a lot of different topics, but I got to switch over to the defensive side of the ball, because obviously some stuff went down on defense in a positive manner. The Browns had guys not named Myles Garrett and Larry Ogunjobi showing out on defense. I mean, you had the likes of, I saw Anthony Zettel do things. I saw TJ Carey do things. Joe Schober being back was huge. What were your thoughts on defense and the job that they did against Julio Jones, one of the top wide receivers in the league?
Well, the best thing that happened was that TJ Carey, he has played with attitude the last few weeks, and his play has gotten better over the last few weeks. And what he did was that he was physical with Julio Jones, and he got in his head a little bit, and it became a battle between the two. And Julio Jones was calling for the football, and TJ Carey was right up in his grill. And that's what you want to see out of your corners, and that's something that is instilled with Greg Williams. He doesn't screw around. I mean, this guy he's about toughness. He wants to slap you right in the mug, and he just doesn't give a damn. And you're seeing that with some of these players. And the same thing with Joe Schober. You can't question what this guy means. He's not a big hitter. He's not going to always stuff the hole. The only problem is he's very consistent. He makes tackles. He makes plays. He can cover, and that was an area of deficiency for this team. It was good to see him back on the field. But the key thing, another thing that hasn't been talked about much was guys like Agba, Myles Garrett, they were getting blows. They were getting time off the field. They didn't play 95% of the snaps. They had an opportunity to get off the field. They let some of these other guys get out there and play the game. And, they produced. They weren't perfect. They made some mistakes, but they produced, and they gave the guys that they need on the field 75% of the time, the opportunity to get a blow, and that was good to see.
It was like, we joke about it, and I can remember with the exception of last year, we'd talk about the Bizarro Browns show up, where you think the season's over, and it's spiraling one way, and then this team shows up, and it's like, where has this team been all year? And this is a young team. This is a team that's had some turmoil. You hope they build on this and they move forward, because what I saw on Sunday just left me shaking my head, because the Browns dominated. They didn't just beat the Falcons. They dominated the Falcons, as you said, from start to finish. And I don't know about you, Lane. I didn't see that coming. I know Bob did. Bob called it last week.
The worst thing is I called it on the show, and then I changed my prediction on the website.
Yep. Bob, gotta have faith in yourself, man. I didn't see, even if you saw a victory, I don't think anyone saw them just coming out there and in all phases of the game dominating a playoff team. And that's what they did. And I mean, I don't know. It's like the Bizarro Browns. I hope it's not the Bizarro Browns. I hope this is a turning point and we see them come out of the bye week and play 6 competitive games and maybe find a way to go 3-3 down that stretch.
You look at what they did, and it's like you said, they dominated for a good portion of that game, and it was very interesting to watch how they did it. They did it fundamentally. They did it at the point of attack. They maintained blocks. It was strange, and that's when you see talent in coaching when it starts to come together. When you see it starting to work. It's something that we haven't seen here because, they were talent deficient for a long time. And you can say that they've been coaching deficient because I don't believe Hugh Jackson did a very good job. And I don't think this is, a very strong staff. But what you saw is that guys are being taught to do things. It's not always perfect. They're young. But they're learning and developing. And you can see an effort like that you saw yesterday is that's you can see they're developing, that they're starting to get it. And you have to question the coaching because the talent develops. Coaching is supposed to get them to that point. And while they've been competitive, they found ways to lose. This was a game that they punched Atlanta right in the face. Atlanta came back. They punched them in the face again. They didn't give a shit. And that's the difference of what you're seeing with this team today compared to what you've seen a couple weeks ago. Now we have to see if it's not going to be one of those things where it was just because of the emotion, does it wear off? Or is this who they're going to become? It's going to be interesting to watch the next few weeks.
All right. So we've established that everything is going to be interesting. I have a 2-part question, and then we'll get you out of here, Lane. First part of the question, how do you feel about Hugh Jackson and cue the I'm Coming Home music because Marvin Lewis is welcoming him back with open arms as he's going back to the Bengals in an unconfirmed role? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think there was ever a doubt. It was going to happen. The minute he left here, he was going back to Cincinnati at some capacity because him and Marvin Lewis are talking. He was going to get his name back out there. Anybody gives him a head coaching job, they should be ushered out of the stadium just like they should have done Jimmy Haslam years ago. Hey, more power to him. Hope he goes down to Cincinnati. Hope he does a good job. I hope the Browns beat their ass twice, and that's where we leave it.
All right, and my final question is a very serious one. When you woke up this morning today, Lane, how dangerous were you feeling?
Considering I only got a couple hours of sleep, I was feeling pretty damn dangerous.
I would like to go on, I'd like to compare on a level of, of yesterday, Baker Mayfield's level of dangerousness versus your level of dangerousness today. And also, yours is always depending on what idiot is bothering you on Twitter at any given moment, too. So I had to ask how dangerous you were feeling today question, Lane.
Yeah, I was pretty effing dangerous.
I like it. Well, Lane, as always, thank you so much for joining the podcast. We appreciate it. Dropping the knowledge, dropping the straight talk. Until next time. Well, everybody, that was great stuff as usual from Lane. Scott, I mean, we got 23 minutes of pure, unadulterated, unfiltered Lane, and then you and I got another 10 minutes of him off the air. We should never stop recording.
I'm going to tell you, next week, I'm going to do what we do, and I'm going to say, Lane, we're clear, and then I'm going to ask another question, and I'm not going to stop recording.
Oh, we got Straight Talk on the air for all of our listeners out there. We got a whole lot more Straight Talk about Hugh Jackson off the air, and I don't really know where to start. Let's just start. The Browns won a game. We talked about it at length with Lane. I just want to start off by asking you a question because you seem to want to go to this direction anyways. Why are you not as impressed with this victory over the Falcons as everybody out there in the Twitterverse?
You see, we are accustomed to the Browns being really, really bad and not being able to win football games, not being able to sneak out a win against a playoff team. And when the team does get a win, it's because the San Diego Chargers, who are eliminated from playoff contention, are here on Christmas Eve and don't want to be here. We're accustomed to that. For most of the teams in the NFL, I'd go so far as to say every single year, 28 of the teams in the NFL, no matter how bad they are, even if they're 4 and 5 win teams, they have the ability to go out one week and show up and ball out and beat handily a borderline playoff team, and right now Atlanta's a borderline playoff team. Most teams have that ability. The Cleveland Browns in years past haven't. What this says is that the Browns, when healthy-ish, because they weren't completely healthy, but when healthy enough, if things go their way and they play with attitude and they get some momentum and they keep that momentum, that this team is good enough to go out and punch a lot of teams in the league in the face and the mouth and win a football game. It doesn't mean that the Browns are about to go 6-0. It doesn't mean that every single problem that this team has is solved. Jamie Collins is still out there half the time not giving a damn. You still have problems at right tackle and left tackle. You still have an offensive line that struggles to pass protect against other teams. I would like to believe that Freddie Kitchens solved everything and that this offense is going to be better. But what happened is you took the offense that had been on film for the first half of the season and threw it out. And what you have now is an offense that teams don't have film on. So of course it's going to look a little more efficient because they can't study what you're about to do. I can tell you that if Todd Haley or Hugh Jackson ran a halfback option pass with the backup halfback to Baker Mayfield up the sideline on a go route, you'd have wanted to run him out of town for that. You would have. But we let that go because we like what we're seeing. And it's a change, and it's not Todd Haley and the hated Hugh Jackson. I also say you have to take what happened on Sunday with a grain of salt because it's a lot easier for an offense to look efficient and good when the other team struggles to turn the ball over and struggles to get to the quarterback. And Atlanta can't get to the quarterback. They don't turn the ball over. It's a very bad defense. If you can't pass protect against Atlanta, give it up. You can't pass protect. We joked around about the offensive line not being able to block Bob last week. But if you can't protect Baker Mayfield against Atlanta, you can't protect Baker Mayfield, period. So while I'm happy and I'm really throwing a wet blanket over all of this, I don't think that this means that all of the problems that this team has are solved. There's still depth issues. TJ Carey showed up. You got some play from your defensive line. You got someone to step up for Christian Kirksey out of the linebacking crew. They stepped up in a combo effort. And you had a good game. You had a great game. It was a dominating game. Football's played with raw emotion. And I think a lot of this was that boost I expected against the Chiefs, where the team comes out with their head on fire because Greg Williams has fired them up and he's got them playing a different style and they're responding to a new voice and they come out and they show you something. I think that might even carry over out of the bye week. And I think it's possible for this team to go 3-3 down the stretch. I think this team is still exactly what I thought it was at the beginning of the year. If coached correctly, if motivated correctly, and if they stay injury-free enough, it's a team that could have won 7 games, and that was the ceiling. If you get the ball to bounce right, maybe you get to 500. Now it's a team that down this stretch coming out of the bye week, I don't think it's insane to say this team can win 3 of these last 6 games. They could also win 1 of these last 6 games and be competitive in all of them. Or they could get some injuries and run the table in reverse, as Jim Rome would say, for the last 6 games. I still don't know what this team is because it's still a team that has depth issues. And Atlanta, that was a classic trap game for Atlanta, by the way, too. They're rolling. They're coming up against the Browns, who are imploding. Just fired half of their coaching staff in the middle of the season. Jimmy Haslam is apparently going full Jimmy Haslam. I mean, that was a classic game for Atlanta to look past and go, we can roll into town and beat the hapless, on fire, imploding Cleveland Browns. So, and look, I'm happy. The Browns did what you want them to do. They beat a good team at home. They punched a team in the mouth. They closed the game out. It was growth. And I've been the guy who said all year, good things are just around the corner for this team. And this is one of those signs. This is why you're watching this team this year. You're watching this team this year to see the growth that you saw this week out of them and hope that that builds. That doesn't make me think that they're about to go win 5 of the last 6. And I think some people in Cleveland are overlooking the fact that you did this against one of the worst defenses in the league that can't get to the quarterback.
So I don't disagree with you, but I'm looking at it from another point of view. So I know for a long time here we have those moments where it's exactly as you said. It's that trap game where the other team comes in riding hot and we beat them and everybody's like, "Oh man, yeah, the Browns got their one win of the one win of the year where they beat a team they had no business beating." But on the other side of things, usually that win comes in December, the end of the year, when there's no chance to build on it. It was some random scrub quarterback with no future at running back. To me, this is the type of win that can propel a young team not only into multiple wins the rest of the year, but to set the stage for learning how to win at the NFL level. You know, you mentioned, I believe when we were talking to Lane about when he said, you know, when we were talking about getting punched in the mouth and getting punched in the mouth again. This game set up where the Browns got the lead, and we've seen this script 100 times, right? Where the Browns get the lead, everybody's feeling good about it, and then all of a sudden, boom, Julio Jones, boom, Julio Jones, boom, Julio Jones, and now all of a sudden you're down 2 scores. We've seen this script 100 times, but we didn't have Baker Mayfield as the quarterback. We didn't have Nick Chubb grinding out yards, making huge plays, 92 yards, setting franchise records for rushing touchdowns. We didn't have that young core. I mean, Antonio Callaway looking competent out there, actually pretending to block on the Chubb run. Brashad frickin' Perriman catching a football for some reason. That tweet took off on Twitter yesterday when I said, here's the biggest surprise of the day, Brashad Perriman looking like an NFL receiver. And I don't know how it got as many likes as it did, but that was funny. But to me, to bring it all back in, this is the type of the win that, regardless of what happens the rest of the year, this is the type of win that signals to a young locker room, to a team with a franchise rookie number 1 overall quarterback at the helm who's going to do whatever it takes to lead his team to victory. This is the type of win that says, we can hang with anybody. Yes, the Atlanta Falcons defense is missing key starters. Yes, they can't pressure the quarterback like we talked about on the podcast last week and we saw on Sunday. But this game could have easily been shootout on shootout, you know, Baker versus Matt Ryan, and whoever's offense scores last. That's not what happened. The offense, like, they took the wind, they took the energy out of the Falcons offense. Like, they just, those drives that usually end with the multiple penalties and the Browns going backwards, it didn't happen. I believe they had I think it was 1 or 2 total penalties the entire game.
That was amazing.
Like, this team, you've gotten rid of the shit. You got rid of Hugh Jackson. You got rid of Todd Haley. The people that were negatively impacting this football team. The head coach that couldn't discipline anybody. That gave him the day off after a win. Not a bye week day off. Like, the next day. Instead of going over film, talking about what happened positively. Hey, guys, you just won your second football game in all these years. Go ahead, have the day off. You got rid of that culture. And regardless who the next head coach is, whether Greg Williams runs the table, like we talked about with Lane, and potentially gets a look, or if it's Bruce Arians or some young up-and-comer, these young players are learning what it takes to win at the NFL level. And they're learning about discipline. They're learning about how to remove the will from another team at the end of the game. And I'm not one to, I don't know what the term is here to use. I'm not one to like get hyped up over nothing, but I just see something different. And maybe it's Baker Mayfield. Maybe it's Nick Chubb. Oh, yeah, by the way, hey, everybody out there, I'm talking positively about Nick Chubb again, which I've done the entire time we've had the podcast, just in case you're listening. There's bits and pieces that are going to be around this team for many years. And yes, this team does have depth issues. We know that. But we have assets to go ahead and fill those depth issues. We have cap room. We have more draft picks. Not that we really want to get even more younger. Wow, more younger. I'm out of it. But it's something different about this win than all those other ones, those lame ducks at the end of the year that's like, oh, hey, here's your participation trophy. Thanks for getting a win this year, Browns fans.
See, I know all anybody has heard me say is he's shitting on the Browns' victory. And that's not what I'm saying. It's a great victory. It's a good victory. It's a victory that you wanted to see this team do. This isn't barely beating Baltimore. This isn't beating the Jets on Thursday Night Football where anything can happen because they weren't expecting Baker Mayfield and they hadn't game planned for it. This was a good win. Atlanta knew what they were going up against, and you beat a borderline playoff team. That's a good win. A borderline playoff team that had been putting it together recently and digging themselves out of a hole and needed this win. I guess what I'm saying is I'm not getting completely carried away and changing my assessment of where this team is. And you said usually we get that win at the end of the year against a team with a scrub third string quarterback who's going to be out of the league or in the CFL in a couple of years. And this wasn't that. But I guess that goes back to my point is that most teams in the league can go get this win at some point in the year. Most teams in the league, even if they win 5 games, find a way to go get this win. They have a way to be able to do that. That doesn't take away from any of the good things that you said are about this that happened on Sunday. And it doesn't make me not appreciate this win and not feel good about it and not feel happy. I'm happy the Browns won. I'd rather be talking about the Browns winning on Sunday than had they lost this game. I'm just not willing to lose my head right now and say this is the start of them beating Cincinnati twice, beating Baltimore, beating Carolina, and who's the game in there? They're not Jacksonville. So they lose to Carolina, but they beat Cincinnati twice, Jacksonville and Baltimore.
We don't play Jacksonville, Denver.
It's Denver? Okay.
Yeah, you go to Cincinnati, to Houston, come back home for Carolina, then you hit the road, go to Denver, come back home for Cincinnati, and the season on the road in Baltimore. Okay,
so I'm not willing to go out there and say that they're going to win all of those games except Carolina and go win 5 of those last games. But I do think they can split with Cincinnati. I do think that they can beat Denver. And I do think it's possible that they can win one of those games against Houston or Baltimore and go 3-3 down the stretch on the other side of this bye week. I think that's very, very possible, but I think that's the ceiling. If I'm being realistic, I'm not altering any expectations more than them getting 3 wins on the other side of this bye week. Now, the crazy thing is, I think if they get 3 wins on the other side of this bye week and they're competitive in the losses, I know Lane said it's going to take a miracle. If they go 3-3 on the other side of this bye week and Greg Williams is 500 as the interim head coach, inheriting the disaster that this season had turned into, I honestly think that's probably enough to bring him back as the head coach and put Kitchens in as the offensive coordinator. And not only do I think it should be enough. You would have seen the team respond to him. You'd have seen a young team turn a corner. If you see this team develop and go 4-4 on the other side of the bye week when they probably should have been ready to quit at 2-5-1, losing their head coach and their offensive coordinator, you got to ask yourself a question. Is Bruce Arians or anyone you're bringing in at the other level, do you know they're going to be better than that? And I don't think you can answer that yes.
I was just having this conversation with one of our subscribers over in our Ask the Insiders forum on OBR. And, what I said was, when Greg Williams is eventually not retained, it's not going to be about Greg Williams and the job that he did. It's not going to be about Greg Williams and whether or not he motivated his men in the locker room and he got the most out of them, and the organization views him as the great motivator, right? It's not going to be about Greg Williams. This is all going to be about John Dorsey finally getting the opportunity to shape this staff with people that he chooses. So Freddie Kitchens remaining in the possibility as offensive coordinator, he was brought on by John Dorsey. Greg Williams, again, maybe he gets seriously considered for this job. I'm on Lane's side of things where I think it basically you have to run the table to, like, Greg Williams would have to win 5 of the last 6 games here after the bye for me to say, okay, he has to be seriously considered. And that's not knocking Greg Williams. I think Greg Williams may be in the running for a head coaching job somewhere in the future, definitely going to be a defensive coordinator again somewhere. But for this organization, this is Dorsey's opportunity to set up the next 5 to 10 years of the franchise. And I know that's not something that we as Browns fans are used to thinking about, because we're used to thinking about our head coach getting fired every 2 years, or going through 5 quarterbacks in that time period. But it's about surrounding Baker Mayfield and these young guys with the staff that is not only going to get the most out of them now, but the next 5 years, hopefully next 10 years. So when I think of Greg Williams, I think of Greg Williams as, yes, he lit a fire under these guys. He's got them playing winning football. The shit is gone in Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley. Like, you've got everybody where they need to be, and that's great. Can Greg Williams sustain this over 16 games? Can he sustain this over the next 32 games, 48 games? Can he sustain this for more than just the second half of the season as the guy who stayed in house that they all love because he's fiery? He's like that crazy uncle. You know, you're at the holiday party, and who do you love at the holiday party? You love your crazy uncle. He's got all the cool stories. He's sliding you beer under the table. He's telling you about the strippers that he used to hang out with in Vietnam, and, you know, that 6-toed girl that he took out back while all his buddies were playing cards. Do you want to go home with your crazy uncle? Like, is the crazy uncle the one that's going to get the most out of you in life? Is he the guy that's going to guide your life the correct way, help you get in college, all that? Probably not. But he's a hell of a good time for, you know, the 6 hours that you're at your family party. And and I'm not knocking Greg Williams because I call him the crazy uncle, but, you know, it's just, I look at this head coaching decision as the opportunity to set up Baker Mayfield and this organization for the next 5 to possibly 10 years. You know, we have to start thinking like that as Browns fans. Greg Williams is going to get the most out of everybody right now, and we're all going to be like, oh, he's done such a good job, he should get 2019. But if you give Greg Williams 2019 and all you get is 6-10 football, you may have missed out on your guy right away in 2019 that could lead you for the next 5 to 10.
I do agree with you that Hugh Jackson was probably the last 2 to 3 year head coach that this team hires, unless they really drop the ball. Because this is the first time since Butch Davis, or maybe Romeo Crennel, where this team is in a position for the next coach to succeed, and that there's enough talent on the front end of the roster that what you're working on in the draft and free agency is depth and the middle to the back part of the roster, and a couple of additions, 1 or 2 at the top part of that depth chart. You're looking for a right tackle. You're looking for a left tackle. You're looking for a number 1 wide receiver. And you're probably looking for another cornerback and someone to replace Jamie Collins. After that, you're looking at depth. Now, if that sounds like a lot, it kind of is, but it's not what you're usually talking about with the Browns. You got a short list of guys you got to replace on the 22. So in that situation, I agree with you that you're looking to build for the next 5 years, 10 years, and you're looking for a long-term coach. And I also understand the fear that, well, Greg Williams is psychopath, hair on fire, F-bombs every other minute, you know, work over the course of 16 games. Will it work over 48 games? In another sport, I might agree with you. Football is a game that you play on raw emotion. It absolutely is a game that is fueled on anger, excitement, and adrenaline. Adrenaline can be your friend. In some sports, adrenaline hurts you. I'm not sure that an adrenaline surge in baseball is a great thing. But in football, you can go out there and hit someone harder. You can get mad. You can get worked up. You can get psyched up. All the adrenaline in the world isn't going to help you hit a splitter. It's just not. But a ton of adrenaline and someone firing you up in the locker room, calling out your manhood, motivating you that way, and getting you ready to run through a brick wall, well, that just might make the difference in you holding that block for an extra second and a half against someone that you shouldn't be able to hold the block against. And so Greg Williams, that might just work. And so far, this defense, it's overachieved. It really has overachieved for what it has. And it's going out there, and these turnovers are not flukes. That's the result of energy. That's the result of intensity. And that's the result of just attacking and saying, who cares if we make a mistake on this play? We're going to get the ball on the next play. And it's working on one side of the ball. For all that we scream about the guardian angel, we scream about the over pursuit, but the defense has played well enough mostly for this to be a playoff team. The offense has not. And people think most of the talent's on the offensive side of this ball. So I don't know. You could be right. And a big part of me is afraid that Greg Williams could go 4-4 in his 8 games and sneak into that spot when you got a Jimmy Haslam who wants to show that he's not Mr. Axeman and that he's going to build some continuity and he's not going to keep blowing it up. And he only does a partial blow up this time. And then Greg goes out there and that doesn't work because they've heard the message. And how many speeches do you have in the locker room that you can give before, oh, look, there's Lou Piniella throwing his hat in the ground and kicking dirt on the umpire again. How many times can you do it? And it runs flat and they're 6-10 and John DeFilippo's off beginning his Hall of Fame head coaching career somewhere, or Lincoln Riley gets pulled out of Oklahoma to go somewhere else. And you can't go after those guys. And Bruce Arians is another year older and now isn't ready to come do it. So I get it. At the same point in time, though, I think it'd be very hard not to give Greg serious consideration if he goes 4-4, because going 4-4 with this team, with the injury issues, with the depth issues, after going 2-5-1, blowing it up in the mid part of the year, that's a taller task than people would give it credit for.
So going back to the game itself, obviously I'm a little more excited about what I saw in that game, applying toward the rest of the season and building toward the future. And not taking away that you aren't excited about getting a win, but just saying I'm obviously a little more excited about it. Was there anything in the game that actually stood out to you as something that wasn't a product of a bad defense in Atlanta, and that actually was, whether it was a player or a series of plays, something that stood out to that game that, you really want to talk about on the podcast and just, give a shout out to?
There were two things. So I don't want to dismiss the whole thing as a bad defense in Atlanta, but I say you have to evaluate that game, including that in your evaluation, and I just don't think people have. Okay, that's just the straight talk part of it here, is that if you're gonna evaluate that game, you have to look at it with that in the equation. That said, Nick Chubb. I mean, that was a coming out party. Nick Chubb has arrived. He's put his stamp on the league, and it shows that if you block just a bit for this guy, he is devastating and he is dominant. And he has, whatever that injury did to him, he has top gear speed in the NFL because he ran away from people on that touchdown run. And the thing that impresses me about him is he has the ability to make his own yards. And he didn't just run and go crazy in that game against Atlanta because the offensive line opened holes for him and the blocking scheme was there. He created some extra yards. He had balance. He outran people. He ran with power. This is the real deal. This is the guy that you're going to see carrying the football for the Cleveland Browns, barring catastrophic injury, for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You hit a home run there in the third round. This is the guy that looks like he can be an 1,100 to 1,400 yard runner in the NFL for some years to come. He's a guy who might go off the board in your fantasy football league in the first round next year for the Cleveland Browns. Go figure. That hasn't happened in quite some time. I don't know if it's ever happened. But Nick Chubb is going to be one of those guys that when you're getting your fantasy football magazines next year, is going to be one of your some of them are going to have him as one of your must-have top 5, top 6 running backs, I think, because, look, he's arrived. I mean, he's just been dominant, and he has all of the skill set to be a dominant running back in this league. The other thing that, the other guy that I really want to give some credit to, one, here's my mea culpa on Joe Schobert. This guy can play. Is he the best middle linebacker in the league? No. But he can cover. He can step up and stop the run. His football IQ is through the roof. He is the quarterback of the defense. He is a guy that you can plug in at middle linebacker, and he's going to be there at middle linebacker, and the Browns don't need to go look to draft the middle linebacker next year. When Kirksey's healthy and you have Schobert, you're just looking to replace Heart of a Lemming Jamie Collins. But Joe Schobert makes a huge difference on this defense, and it was evident on Sunday the difference that he makes out there. So I was impressed with Joe Schobert. I have turned the corner on Joe Schobert, and that was not just a guy on a bad team making plays. Joe Schobert is a guy who's going to be in the NFL for a while, and he's going to be a guy playing at either an all-pro level or a borderline all-pro level, I think, for quite some time. TJ Carey. We've been up and down on TJ Carey in this secondary all year. TJ Carey drew a tough assignment against one of the 3 best wide receivers in the league. And while Julio Jones got his 7-8 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown, TJ Carey followed him around all day and did a damn fine job playing ball against Julio Jones and was a big part of that win. I've talked all year about depth, and when you get past the first couple of guys, the Browns don't have the depth. TJ Carey is your depth on this team. And TJ Carey was asked to go play a starter's role on Sunday against one of the best wide receivers in the history of the league, and he more than answered the bell. And that's encouraging because in years past, the Browns haven't had a guy that in the depth position could step up and do that. I mean, I'm very impressed with what TJ Carey did on Sunday. And then lastly, you got to be impressed with Baker Mayfield. I don't care if it was an offense that couldn't get to him. Yes, I know this is weird because I just spent the whole time saying you have a defense that can't get to the quarterback and you have to put that into the equation. And maybe that has Baker Mayfield start the game 9 of 13, 10 of 13. Started the game 13 of 13. He knew where he was going with the ball. He was decisive. He was accurate. The play to Hollywood Higgins was just amazing. I mean, he bought some time. He scrambled. He made a throw on the run to his right that was perfectly thrown. The kid is still fearless. Everything that's gone wrong hasn't dampened his spirits, hasn't taken away his gambler's mentality. The kid's a gunslinger, and when you're a gunslinger, you got to keep throwing the football. Shooter's got to shoot. Gunslinger's got to gunsling. And Baker Mayfield isn't going to go away from that. He isn't going to be broken. He's going to ride this thing through. A couple weeks ago, I said, you're teaching Baker bad habits, and is this good for him? Well, apparently Baker's showing us all, including me, that he can handle losses. He can grow from it, and it's not going to break him mentally. The kid's faced adversity all his life and overcome it every step of the way. Every step of the way, and this is nothing new for him. And you have to be impressed. Your rookie quarterback outshone Matt Ryan. He outshined him. He outplayed him. Baker Mayfield versus Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan wasn't the best quarterback on the field on Sunday. These are all great things for the Cleveland Browns, and they played with intensity, and they played like they were the better team, and they never acted like they didn't believe that they were the better team on Sunday. And that goes right back to Greg Williams. So, yeah, as much as I spent the first half of this podcast tempering my reaction to what's going on, and many people are going to just hate me for the first half of the podcast and never get to this, Sunday was a good day. I just think it's an omen for good days in 2019 and not so much that they're going 5-1 down the stretch in 2018.
So you kind of crushed out the game there. I really don't have too much more to say other than, it's really nice to see, even though he had the one screw-up play where Baker got stripped but then got the ball, Greg Robinson is looking night and day better than he did at any point during training camp when I was there, at any point during preseason. And maybe that's a product of Freddie Kitchens' scheme and his play calling and the way that they try to get the ball out of Baker's hand a little quicker. But right now we're seeing a quarterback who is very confident in his left tackle. And that's not something that you could say about Baker Mayfield's play back there at any point in time with Harrison at left tackle. So I know the Browns are coming out and they're saying publicly it's going to be a competition. We're not handing the job to anybody. I will be surprised if you come out of the bye week and Greg Robinson is not the starting left tackle for this football team. So I wanted to give Greg Robinson a little bit of a shout out because he's doing a really good job there. Not that he listens to the podcast, but to our listeners, a little shout out there. I have to point something out to Browns fans. And it seems like every other week when I'm on Twitter, the damn cesspool that I love so much, I always see some idiot mention that Emmanuel Ogbah is a bust.
Boy, I'm glad I'm not that idiot anymore.
And it's out of nowhere. Like, watching the game, you see Emmanuel Ogbah seal the edge on a run, force the run back inside. You see Emmanuel Ogbah bat down a pass. You see Emmanuel Ogbah pressure the quarterback, which helps Larry Ogunjobi get inside and make a tackle behind the line of scrimmage or make a sack. And all of a sudden, like clockwork, Emmanuel Ogbah's a bust. He doesn't do anything. Like, dude, what football games are all of you out there watching that you, at some point during a football game, say Emmanuel Ogbah is a bust? The guy is, like, I saw somebody say something during this game that they were questioning his effort on a play. It was like, it was a long, drawn-out drive, and the play was to the opposite side, and the play was already over, and Ogbah stopped running and turned around and went back because the play was over. And all of a sudden, like clockwork, boom, Emmanuel Ogbah hater 221843 bot out of Russia pops up in my timeline and is just like clockwork bashing Emmanuel Ogbah. Guys, listen. On the defensive line in the NFL, you do not need to record sacks to be effective at your job. You do not need to bring down the running back every single play to be effective at your job. Emmanuel Ogbah does his job 85% of the time when he's on the field, if not higher than that. Just because Emmanuel Ogbah's job may be to seal the edge on a run, force the run back inside, or maybe his job is to punch his offensive lineman and then jump up in the air and bat a pass down. Or maybe his job is to, for some ungodly known reason with Greg Williams and his defensive ends, drop back in zone and play coverage. Like, just because Emmanuel Ogbah is doing his job and you don't notice him until the one time that he walked back to the line of scrimmage because he's been on the field for 75% of the snaps in the game, doesn't mean that Emmanuel Ogbah is Jamie Collinsing it out there and loafing on plays. The guy does his job week in, week out. Stop trying to make a bust where there's not a bust. Like, the guy has been good. I understand that we're all jaded and we think that every single player drafted by every previous regime should end up being a bust eventually. The guy does his job, and he does it well. He plays opposite of Myles Garrett and outside of Larry Ogunjobi. He does his job. He creates opportunities for the rest of the guys on the line and anybody else that's rushing around him.
You know, I was not a fan of the draft pick of Emmanuel Ogbah. And in his first season, I kind of thought that Ogbah was just a guy. And even for a good part of the second season, I kind of thought Ogbah was just a guy. And my friend Bob here kept telling me for a season and a half, look, he's more than that. He's more than that. He's more than that. I never thought he was a bust. But it is easy to overlook what Ogbah does. And I know I'm supposed to be the irrational fan perspective at times here, you know, but got to agree with Bob here. One of the things we talked about with Myles Garrett is, Myles, you got to do more than just rush around edge and run past your guy and push past so that, you got to read run. And Myles has done a better job doing that. You've never had to say that about Emmanuel Ogbah. The guy has always played smart. He plays smart, efficient, effective football at defensive end. No, he's never going to be an elite pass rusher. That's not his game. But what he does is something that we have screamed about at defensive end since 1999. He seals the edge. He sets the edge. He doesn't over pursue. When the defense over pursues, it's very rarely Emmanuel Ogbah who is over pursued. He maintains his assignment. One of the things that a defensive coordinator will drive him nuts is when you leave your assignment to follow the motion of the play. You sometimes, especially on the defensive line, your job is just to hold your gap and force the running back the other way to where someone is waiting to make that play. It's called unselfish play. It's easy to go fly to the football and try to be the guy diving on there to make a tackle and a hero play. That's a hero play. What makes a winning team is a guy that is willing to sit there all day and maintain his assignment to force the ball away to his teammate who can make the play and get the glory and eat. And know that what he did is only going to show up on the All-22, and it's only going to show up to the coaches. And he's got to look at the fans and say, the fans are going to look at him and go, oh, that's Emmanuel Ogbah. Who is he? Oh, no, he's the guy that just stands there on the line and does what he's supposed to do, but doesn't do anything exciting or sexy for the team. He's not the guy getting all the glory like Larry O and Myles Garrett. But what Emmanuel Ogbah does allows them to make their plays. It allows Joe Schobert to step up in the hole and make his play because he's forced the running back where he's supposed to go. Or he's dropped into coverage and forces the quarterback off of that first read, hesitate for half a second, force a ball into a tight window, and allow Denzel Ward to have an interception. This is what Emmanuel Ogbah does, and it doesn't show up, and it's called unselfish, good, efficient, quality football. Every team needs an Emmanuel Ogbah. Every team wishes they had an Emmanuel Ogbah. Not every team does have an Emmanuel Ogbah.
It's like I have a tear in my eye. I've got you talking positively about Joe Schobert and Emmanuel Ogbah after all these years. This is fantastic to me.
And I started out such a wet blanket mode tonight.
I know.
Look, this is just, you get two sides with me. I am logical. There's an irrationality to me at times, but there's a logic buried behind this. And all I was trying to say at the beginning is you have to include some of those other factors in this evaluation so you don't go, Super Bowl, Greg Williams era, Greg's going to lead us to the promised land. It's all changed. See, you just get Hugh out and it fixes all the evils, baby. Dog pounds of barking. We're going to sneak in, run the table, get into the playoffs. 3 games of the Super Bowl. Greatest story ever. The 30 years from now is going to be amazing. Remember the time the Browns fired Hugh Jackson and went on a historic 7-game winning streak to close the season, sneak into the playoffs by virtue of a tie in week 1, and go on to bring Cleveland their first football championship since 1964. Cleveland was never the same. It soon became the capital of Ohio, then the capital of the United States, and went on to found a global empire of peace and prosperity, all because of Greg Williams.
Well, I didn't know you were going to cut a promo in the middle of the podcast, Scott. So, anyways...
randomly, that happens.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I mean, you got to dig up that if you're a man in America and you get married, you're an idiot rant.
Oh, geez.
Randomly that can happen.
All right. So we got to win. We go into the bye week. Usually at this point of the podcast, this is where we'd be looking ahead to the next game and then taking some subscriber questions. We didn't have any of those this week other than the guy who wanted to know what we thought about if Jimmy Haslam is realizing that, he waited too long to get rid of Hugh and everybody. I think it's pretty obvious. So we don't need to answer that. But you know what? Instead of just cutting the podcast short right now, don't worry, everybody. We're going to get you out of here quickly. I do want to look back at the first, 10 games of the season. And I'd like to ask you just one question, and then I'll answer the same question, and then we can get out of here. What has been your favorite moment? It can be positive or negative. It could be a negative, but something that just stands out to you that was just funny. What's your favorite moment of the first 10 games of the season? Of the games, not firing Hugh Jackson, not firing Todd Haley.
Okay. So this is going to be really weird. It's going to be really weird. My favorite moment of this season is the moment when I thought Carlos Hyde converted the 4th and 1 against the Raiders and the Browns had a winning record. Before that all turned. At that moment, I was on cloud 9. I had tweeted out the 2-1-1 mother bleeping winning record having mother bleeping Cleveland bleeping Browns. I was ready to go. I haven't been that excited since Kyrie Irving hit the 3 in the face of Steph Curry and LeBron James blocked Iggy. I haven't been that fired up since that moment. That right there is my high water favorite moment of the season when I thought Carlos Hyde converted that first down and did convert that first down. Then it was all ripped away. But if you isolate a moment in time in the first 10 weeks, that's it.
So what's weird for me is, so I'm gonna do 2 moments. I'm cheating. So the moment that was amazing for me was in the 4th quarter of that game against the Saints, when out of nowhere, Tyrod Taylor magically grew a cannon and a pair of balls and pushed the ball down the field and fired it so far that in the middle of his stride, Antonio Callaway looks up and goes, "Oh shit, I gotta run faster." And you just see this gear kick in. and he catches the ball in the back of the end zone, and they tie up that football game, and it's like, oh, we might be able to beat the Saints on the road. Whoa, our 4th-round rookie, wide receiver, he might be Tyreek Hill. Hey, this Tyrod Taylor trade of a 3rd-round pick for this guy, not too bad. Baker's going to learn and watch this guy beat the Saints on the road after tying the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 1. Here we go. This plan is actually going to work out. Obviously, as we know, it did not work out. So that was my cool in-game moment. And then I have to cheat on this one. So I was at the Thursday night game. Baker comes in relief, and they come back and they beat the Jets after Tyrod Taylor, quote unquote, leaves with an injury. And when the game ended, not one person that was wearing Browns colors left the lower bowl. It was honestly one of the coolest moments I've ever been part of. And I've been to tons of Tribe games, tons of Cavs games. Nobody moved. And then when everybody finally left, when all the players left the field, all the way from the stadium to the casino, because that's where I was parked, all you hear are people chanting, Baker Mayfield, Baker Mayfield. Like, I posted those videos on Twitter and they went nuts. Like, it went crazy, viral, all that stuff. I didn't drop my Instagram underneath it, unfortunately, because I deleted that thing. But I would have gained a lot of followers, probably. But no, it was just like, so it's just these two polar opposite moments where it was like Tyrod Taylor does this great thing and we think we're going to win. And then Baker Mayfield does the thing that makes you go, oh shit, we've got our guy finally. And the whole city rallies around. And we've had so many awful moments since those games and in between leading up to this win against the Falcons. But those two moments stand out to me. They're polar opposites, but it was just such a cool feeling. And I wanted to share that with everybody.
Yeah, if I was there at that game for that perspective, I'd probably agree with you on it.
Well, on that note, we don't need to talk anymore. Let's go ahead and have our own bye week. We'll give you guys a bye week instead of making you listen to us for another 30 minutes. Enjoy your victory Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever you're listening to this podcast. And we'll try and figure out something to talk about next Monday because we won't have a game to talk about, but we still want to deliver you a podcast. Maybe we'll reach out. We'll get Jake Burns on the podcast. Maybe get Sobo, Jared. Get some of the OBR guys on to talk about the first half of the season, their expectations for the rest of the year. Maybe do a little bit of dreaded draft talk, even though, I don't think anybody's ready to start talking draft yet, except for Jared.
No, we're going 6-0 on the other side of the bye week.
So... all right, well, on that note, Scott, thank you as always for co-hosting the podcast with me. Big thank you out to Lane for stopping by, dropping that straight talk on everybody. And as always, thank you everybody out there for listening. We appreciate it if you would subscribe, give us likes, leave comments, tell all of the podcast world how amazing we are. Until next time, we get to say go Browns, and it's going to mean something for a full another week, baby.
Super Bowl!